All right. How does 9-2 sound in the out of conference schedule for Boston College basketball? BC takes care of business against Lehigh. We got Beacon Street Ball on today to talk about the game. We're going to hear his thoughts and what we saw with Claudel Harris having an enormous game against Lehigh. We'll talk all about that on today's show.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, this is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm the publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 network. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Folks, we've been knee-deep in football news with recruiting, transfer portals, National Signing Day. Fenway Bowl, we've had a ton of it. Let's take a step back today. Let's look at basketball, the team that is playing their butts off right now, sitting at 9-3 after beating Lehigh. We're going to look at that game and look at where they stand heading into ACC play. And there's no better person to talk about this team than Beacon Street Ball, who's been our weekly guest, and we're so excited to have him back on. Beak, how's it going?
It's going good. Just got back from the game. Excited to break it down and sort of look at non-conference as a whole.
All right. So the big story in this game, Claudel Harris Jr., 29 points. He gets his 1,000th point of his career. What did he score? Like 15 points to start the game off. Basically, he was just on fire. What did you see out of this game? It was, Lehigh on a Thursday before Christmas. Sounded like it was a pretty good crowd. And give me some of your takeaways from this.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start where you started with Claudel. So Claudel finishes with 29. On 10 for 15 shooting and 7 for 10 from 3, which is just an unbelievable stat line. I as you mentioned, he started, I'm trying to do it here in the background. It looks like he started with 14 of BC's first 15 points, and that was all in about 5.5 minutes. So he had 14 points in 5.5 minutes, 4 for 4 from 3 to start. And he was unbelievable. I think he's a different type of guard. Like he really is. He's a guard that we haven't seen since Jerome or Kai, with just his ability to create his own shot. Of those first 4, only 1 was assisted. The other 3 came, him getting some space from his Lehigh defender. And I'm not going to say Lehigh was any great team, but gets his 1,000th point. I would have liked to see him go for the career high, and Earl leave him in there. His career high, I believe, is 31, which happened at Charleston Southern. But he was unbelievable. His family was there, which, for somebody like me who cares about that type of stuff, I think that's awesome. Mm-hmm. But overall, I thought the whole team played pretty well. You get 13 from Jay-Z on 6 for 8 shooting, Post with a quote unquote off night, but he still gives you 13 and 6 boards. Devin McLaughlin with a quiet 8 points and 10 boards. So, that's the difference, I really think, with this BC team. And that's what I'm going to dive into a little deeper in my recap tomorrow on Eagle Insider is, this team can get points from a variety of people, and that makes it really easy to beat bad teams by, pretty significant margins. Ends at 85-69, and there's a BC team that's scoring probably the best that we've seen in a decade.
And I saw a statistic, I think Brett Ryder of Eagle Daily put it up, that BC has scored 80 or more points more this season than they did under Errol Grant over the first 2 years combined.
I believe it. Over 80 in their last 4. So over their last 4, some fast math here, averaging about 86 a night. So, that's something that, when you watch other college basketball teams, I watched the North Carolina game last night, and that's one of the things you see, right? These elite teams can score with anybody or on anybody. And it's nice to see BC doing that to go a little farther here. Their last 5 wins, all 5, they got to 80. And in their losses, they haven't gone to 80. So when they do get to 80, they're 6-0 on the year, it looks like. So, that'll be interesting to see if that trend can continue in ACC play.
And you look at this out-of-conference schedule. You finish the out-of-conference schedule at 9-2, one of the best in recent memory. You don't have – you can look at Loyola Chicago as your WTF loss, but, it's not New Hampshire. It's not Maine. No. It's not Tarleton State. It's a different loss. And sometimes just bad losses happen and you only had one. Every other game out of conference, it felt like BC just took care of business,
I
whether it was
agree.
Harvard, whether it was Holy Cross, Stonehill. There was no game that it felt like these lower conference teams that BC has struggled. And it's not just Earl Grant. I mean, Christian, Donahue, you go back, it's been a trend under this team that they just struggle to put teams away. This team seems different. They just have enough offensive game power and defense. They're doing everything where they're just making these games comfortable wins. I mean, even when you beat Lehigh by 17, you want to win by more, but you didn't feel like they were going to ever win this game.
No, and I think that what you ended on there is exactly how I feel. So you have, even in that St. John's game, I thought, save the 90-second burst early in the second half from St. John's, I thought BC was in control for the vast majority of that game, and that, if you feel the way I do, you're talking about 4 straight games since the NC State loss where they were in it for the whole game, where they have really probably been I would almost go as far as to say the dominant team for, of those, 160 minutes over the last 4 games, for maybe 155 of them. So that's just different. And, I think I talked about this, but when the schedule came out a few months ago, everything is setting up for BC to really have a really strong January. I know where I'm sort of jumping ahead here, but I really do look at it and say this team has to have a lot of confidence right now. They're playing much better basketball than they were when they started the year 4-0. In those games, I mean, they played pretty well against Fairfield on opening night, but then, a 4-point win over Citadel, 7-point win over Richmond, and a 9-point win over Harvard. You compare that to where we're at, over these last 4, and you've got 3 blowouts, and then I would say a more comfortable than the score would dictate win over St. John's.
Yeah, I mean, they've just improved, and that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
You've seen the growth under Earl Grant from year 1 to year 3, but you're also seeing the growth for Earl Grant's team from game 1 to now. They're getting better as the season goes on. You're seeing the confidence growing. I mean, we're going to talk about Claudel Harris a little bit in a little bit more. This is a guy that started the season off, and we were joking after that first couple games, is this Eli Carter part 2?
Yeah, no, I think that's, to me, another thing about this team that is different, right? Is one, you can get points from probably 3 or 4 guys, definitely 3 guys between Zachary, Post, and Claudel, but also there's really nobody forcing shots right now. Even Post, who I think has every right to force shots, isn't doing it, and you have guys trusting their shooters and Post, passing, and Zachary passing up probably what could be good looks, especially against these inferior opponents, and just getting the ball to the hot hand. And that's going to be the key for this team. I really do believe it. I mean, I think Claudel is probably our most talented offensive guard since probably maybe Winston Tabbs his freshman year, but he's right up there, if not with Jerome and Kai. And that's the type of player you need to take down these ranked teams that they're going to see, twice in January, and then, a few more times to end the year. So I like where this team's at, and I am very confident headed into this January run.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about this in a little bit, turning into ACC play, but you have 4 games against Louisville and Notre Dame, who are both just train wrecks right now. But as you just said, I'm not even. You can look beyond that at this point. You're looking at these ranked teams, at these better teams, and going, BC can hang with any of them. They're not. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but no, I completely agree. I think that's the most intriguing thing. And I know, talking with people inside the program, they feel the same way, right? You have Clemson at 18 in the country right now. We see them on the 13th of January. It's a road game on a Saturday afternoon. They played Clemson in that building really well, won down there a couple years ago, and they played Clemson well. And then you have Carolina the following Saturday, who's 11th in the country. I thought Carolina played really well last night, but there's nobody on Carolina who's scaring me. And you could make an argument that BC's top 3 is better than Carolina's top 3 with the way Post and Zachary have been playing. So I totally agree. And I think that's why hopes are as high as they are inside the building. And I think the fan base, I think it'll happen quick. I think by the time students are back on campus, we could be looking at a team where people are really on board the bandwagon in a way we haven't seen in probably, almost 15 years.
All right. In a moment, we're going to talk about some takeaways from the beginning of the season. We're about halfway. We're about done with. We're obviously done with out of conference schedule now. As we head into ACC play, what are some takeaways from the first 12 games of the season? What are we looking at? Some thoughts that Beak has. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. Now, if you're getting ready to go to a game, concert, theater, you need to not worry about when you're going to buy your tickets because Gametime has got you covered. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And with killer fat last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. If you're getting ready to go to that Fenway Bowl and you're looking to find good seats, Fenway can be tricky. You can get bad seats anywhere there. Go use Gametime. They're going to show you exactly where you're going to sit. And you can envision in a baseball stadium where your football seats are going to be. It's crazy, right? And you're going to get the best price guarantee. So see the view from your seat, know exactly what you're buying. With all-in prices, they're going to show you a total up front. There's no hidden fees. You're not going to get, like with some of those other sites, you're not going to get those, absorbent fees that make your tickets go up incredibly expensive. You're not going to get that with Gametime. I used it to get tickets to BC, and I'm going to use it more when theater season starts and some baseball season too. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. Hope you guys are having a great holiday season. Christmas is right around the corner. I know some of you might be celebrating Hanukkah. I want to wish you all a happy Hanukkah as well. And, hopefully you're just having a great time with your family and friends. So we're here, we're talking. And if you have not done so already, Beak and I are both part of Eagle Insider. I'm the editor. Beak is one of our writers. We have Mitch. We have BC Hockey Blogger. We've got a great group of writers here. Come on over right now. 60% off a VIP subscription. You're going to get top-notch coverage. Transfer portal season's around. If you know me, I know everything before it happens. I know that there's already one transfer you guys don't even know about yet. It's going to be exciting. That's coming in. I'm already looking at number 2. I'm already talking about it on the message board. So come on over there right now. All right. So Beak, we're done with out of conference schedule. What are some of your takeaways about this team that we haven't really talked about that you want to bring up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, and this is something that was talked about within the program, before the season started, that I didn't really put a ton of weight into at the time, but the schedule, right? And it's easy to say, like, well, they played the Citadel because Earl is connected to Charleston, and they played at Vanderbilt because that's how the SEC ACC challenge sort of drew. But you look at it, and they've done a really good job of crafting a schedule and taking care of business on that schedule to set themselves up for a tournament run. I mean, everybody, when Post decided to come back and everyone else pretty much stayed in their places, the tournament was obviously the goal. But for a school like Boston College, you have to, manufacture that, right? I mean, if you're not going to win 26-7 games in the way the ACC is playing out, you're probably not a lock. So you got to go get some quality road wins, and BC's done a really, really good job of that with that schedule so far. I think it probably won't get talked about a ton, but already having a quad 2 win for BC is something that we're not used to, and they've got plenty of chances to pick up some more quality wins because of the way the ACC schedule sort of falls here, with getting 3 of the first 4 games in January as road games. So I really think that the coaching staff deserves a lot of credit, and that's before you even get into, player development. I think you look at some guys who, Claudel Harris could be the most talented guy in the world when he showed up here. I sort of get the sense that he was very, very good, but they've done a really good job of making him a better defender and making him, a little more efficient is probably the best word for it. Obviously, Post and Zachary have made really good strides. I think Zachary's done a great job sort of moving from, I would just call him a game manager, into something that is a lot more. I think he's right up there right now, at least as one of the probably 3 or 4 best point guards in the ACC. And so, I think if you're a BC fan and just a fan of the program, and maybe you're not a huge basketball guy, you have to at least look at it and say, we have the right guy coaching this team. And for, if you're somebody like me who was in favor of Al being gone at the end there, you're talking, I was a big Christian guy for about a year and a half, but you're talking about a very short run in the last 15 years where we've really been confident that the right guy's leading the program. And I think that's probably the best thing that a BC basketball fan could hope for, in year 3 of a new coach and in a changing landscape in college sports.
So I got some superlatives I want to ask you about.
All right.
Play. Let's hand out some superlatives for this team.
All right. Put me on the spot here. I love it. Let's do it.
All right. So who's the most impressive? And you could say Quentin Post, but who's the most impressive player in the first half of the season?
If it is Quentin Post, but it's not because of the scoring. I think it's everything else. And I wrote about this in my recap after St. John's, but the defense and the passing are elevated in a way that you don't often see from in your last year in college. Like if those type of jumps usually come pretty early. I think Devin McLaughlin's a great example of that, right? He made he was good defensively his freshman year, but he fouled too much. And then in year 2, he got a lot better with his fouling. Post has gone from being a tall guy who puts his hands up to being an actively good defender. I mean, he had blocks on consecutive possessions tonight that you just wouldn't see him getting in years past. And then using the St. John's game as an example, I think he was responsible for 16 points in the second half of that game, but he only scored 2. That's not something you see out of a 7-footer. And I think that's really good. So I'll go Post for that.
Okay. Who's the most surprising player of the first half?
I'm going to go with Elijah Strong, and it should be Claudel Harris. But, when you have a guy who, I believe when Elijah signed, he had 0 high major offers, and Earl knew him, and credit to Earl for finding him. But it's just another example of Earl finding an under-recruited guy, much like Al Skinner used to do, and trusting him to play as a freshman. He's not playing meaningful minutes, but he's getting in there against real teams, got in there tonight and hit a pretty nice turnaround jumper. And I think, the fact that he looks like he's going to be serviceable in ACC play in year 1 is a huge win for this program that desperately needed some interior help.
All right. And then our last superlative, who's the most improved player? And it could be a freshman improving from the beginning of camp to now, or someone from the end of last year to now.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think it's probably Devin, and that's probably a weird one because his stats I don't think are going to look all that different, but he's cleaned up the things that I would say held him back the most. So the foul trouble, which was an issue I had it at one point, but I want to say it was like he's like 80 or 85% of games last year where he had 3 or 4 fouls by like the 10-minute mark in the second half. He's cleaned that up drastically. He is much more confident shooting the basketball, and that's something that I think he's a good shooter, and I wanted him to shoot it more last year. So I think especially tonight was a good example. You see him maybe looking for his shot a little more than he was. And then he's just a glue guy. He's a winner. And that's what this team needs. They needed to surround the 1-2 or maybe now 1-2-3 punch with guys who are winners. And I think there's no better winner on this basketball program than Devin McLaughlin.
All right. In our final segment, Beak and I are going to look at the start of ACC play. What are our expectations? What does BC need to do? And Beak's final thoughts heading into Christmas break. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. Right now, as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The Fenway Bowl is right around the corner, and if you don't live in the state of Massachusetts, you could be thinking about the 9.5-point spread where SMU is a favorite. Do you think BC has enough to cover that? I don't. So you can go into FanDuel if you agree with me. And we talked to the SMU writer on our show for Tuesday. You can hear his thoughts, and you can hear why Mitch and I both think that the spread is right around where it should be. And if you're thinking about it, you can go into FanDuel and find the spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more for NFL, NBA, you name it, they have it. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, the official sports partner of the NFL. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. And we are talking BC and Lehigh. And we're so excited to have Beacon Street Ball on here. He's our weekly guest to talk basketball. And there's no better person to talk about basketball than Beak. So now that the out-of-conference schedule is done, we're getting ready for the ACC play. What do you think the minimum amount of wins BC needs to get themselves eligible for postseason play?
Yeah, so I the simple answer is probably 14, and that sounds like a crazy number, but I think NC State is one of the better. They're a top half team, let's say that. So you've already played a top half once. You mentioned earlier, you get Louisville twice, you get Notre Dame twice. You get Wake Forest at home when it'll be dead. You get Syracuse without students, and you get Georgia Tech without students. So say you win 5 of those 6 that I just outlined there. 6 of those 7 I outlined there. Well, you're making a pretty good start. That being said, I think you could find a way in at 13-7 if you beat the right teams, and you might be able to get in at 12-8 if you beat the right teams. And those right teams, as it currently stands, I actually have this up in front of me because I figured we were heading here, are going to be Clemson's going to be the biggest one. Right now, Clemson sits in the net, and that's probably the most important one. Clemson is 12 in the net right now. You pick them off on the road, that's a huge, huge resume building win. You get Duke on the road, helps. I think they can beat Duke. You get Miami twice, you split with Miami. Those are all teams that are, top. They're quad 1 games. Let's just start with that. They're all going to be quad 1 teams. And so maybe you can figure it out at 13-7 or 12-8, but yeah, it's going to matter more who you beat. And again, to finish the answer to the question, but you can't lose to Louisville and you can't lose to Notre Dame. It's not a year where you can split with those teams and get away with it. Those are 4 must-win games. They're as much of a must-win, especially Louisville, as a game like the Citadel or a game like Richmond.
And obviously, BC is an improved team. What do they still need to improve on? What do you think that at practice Earl Grant is still hammering home because they need to get better at X and Y?
I don't think he's hammering it home, but the thing that scares me the most is the pace that they're playing with right now, because it's not what Earl is used to doing. You look at Earl Grant teams from years 1 and 2 here, and you even go back to Charleston. He is not used to being a top half or top third tempo pace team in college basketball. And the reason why that scares me so much is that when shots don't drop and you play fast against inferior opponents, you can get away with it. Against teams that are on your level or maybe a little bit more talented from a shooting perspective, you can get down 15, 18 points in a hurry. So I worry that I love scoring points as much as the next guy, but I worry that this team is playing a little too quick sometimes, and that could hurt them, especially on the road in conference.
And then just a last thought about, heading into the second half. What player do you project to jump? Like we've seen growth with a lot, as you mentioned, with McLaughlin and Zachary and even Post. And it could be Elijah Strong, but what player are you expecting to take a big jump for the second?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably Donald Hand Jr. is probably the most intriguing player to me. He's a redshirt freshman, ACC, not overly strong on freshmen. He got some looks for, the all freshman team preseason. So I think there's a chance he's playing more minutes. Scoring's not necessarily there as much as it was at the beginning, but he's playing more minutes. I think he's getting more comfortable on the ankle and the knee. He's a guy where I would not shock me if we, ended the year and you look back and, he averaged 8.5 in conference or 9 in conference. And coming off the bench, I think that's something that BC is really going to need. Madsen's obviously been great for the last couple of weeks. And I thought the Globe had a really good piece on him recently, and probably maybe shed some light into why that is with the, the health stuff. But, I think Donald Hand is one of those guys. He's an ACC body, and I think this is a real coming out party potential for him as we wrap up the year.
All right, as we wrap things up, is there any last thoughts you have about basketball? Is there something you want
My
to?
only last thoughts is that I sincerely hope that when we do this, after Wake Forest, we are 10-3, because starting 0-2 in ACC after that non-conference, it would just be painful.
Yeah, hope for a win there. Yeah, exactly. All right, so Beak, I know you have some things coming out. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. So first and foremost, I appreciate everybody who's been following me on Twitter. It's at Beacon ST Ball on Twitter, so Beacon Street Ball. And in the new year, we are, me and in my non-Twitter life, we're working on what I think is probably one of the coolest things that we've ever done. It's to give a little tidbit. It's basically going to be a complete store for Boston College merch, and it's got a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of high quality stuff that takes just some of the merch that we've done over the past 3 years to a whole nother level. And it moves it a little more away from fan stuff and into stuff that I think just, people who love sports or who just love Boston College. So stay tuned for that. I'm super excited about it. Probably going to be, early 2024, but I'm pumped. And again, I just appreciate everybody following on Twitter and all that stuff. And I love, interacting with people. So thank you to everyone, and I'm looking forward to continuing writing here on Eagle Insider.
Yeah, Beak's a must follow on Twitter. If you have not done so already, Beacon Street Ball, make sure you follow him up on Twitter as well. And check out his work on Eagle Insider. As I said, 60% off. You can get in, check out his work.
There's really good stuff. I'm going to say this. This is an honest plug. So I was not a subscriber prior to writing for Eagle Insider. I got on there and I read some of Mitch's football stuff, and I texted AJ and I said, this is unbelievable.
Right.
His football stuff is, if you're a college football fan, even if you're like a casual BC fan, his like football breakdowns are unbelievable. Like the game stuff is unbelievable. The depth of stuff he gets into and play design and all that stuff. If you're just I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about football, but it's very, very interesting. And so I think just for that, like, listen, if you subscribe for me, thank you very much. But Mitch's stuff is really, really good. And I'm not a hockey guy by any means, but by all accounts, BC Hockey Blogger stuff is just as good. So I do think it's worth the money.
Yeah. Hockey Blogger just had an interview with Greg Brown on there.
Look at that. Yeah.
So I'm doing. We've got some great stuff on there, and Beak's got the basketball stuff covered. I specifically targeted people on our site that are going to bring a wealth of knowledge. I don't want just, reporters that go to press conference. That's great too, but I wanted people who understand the game, because I feel like there's a lot that you can learn. And as he said, Mitch, every time Mitch does his, I rewatched the game so you don't have
that's
to.
exactly. Yeah, that's what I was referencing.
And I'm already saying, and hopefully it's not listening right now, because I know he listens sometimes, but if BC gets blown out, like, just rewatching what he sees is incredible, and it gives you such great insight. So check it out. This is our last episode for Christmas, so if you are celebrating, Merry Christmas to each and every one of you out there. Thank you all who are everyday listeners to Locked On BC. We'll have Beak back on next week to talk some basketball. We have a ton to talk about with Fenway Bowl. As I said, I threw out a wire GIF, so there's a transfer coming. I have some hints up on the site too, so again, for VIP users, you might be able to find out who that's going to be. For Beak, this is AJ. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you again soon. Take care, everyone.